Sometimes it's the little things that surprise us the most. Today I want to talk about the 10 biggest shocks moving from the Canon 5D-Mark4 to the Canon R5. Okay, so I finally got my hands on the Canon R5. I ordered this back at the end of August and finally got it toward the end of October. I've had it for about a week and it's a really great little camera, really excited to try and go into it. But what I want to do is, I know I am a long-time Canon DSLR user. This is actually my first move into the mirrorless world. And while this is the future, while I'm really excited about it, there are definitely some shocks if you're going from that old DSLR world into the mirrorless world. And what I wanted to do is take a minute and talk about what I see as the 10 biggest shocks that you as a long-term DSL user might encounter as you go into this world of Canon mirrorless cameras. So let's get into it. Okay, so number one, the top of the camera is just really different now. I know all those cameras that I've had in my life, the button layouts on Canons were always very similar, but now if you look at the top, you have some big changes. One, you don't have your ISO, white balance, focus, top buttons here anymore, and the program dial has been removed. Now, this isn't a bad thing, it's just a little bit different. I know the first time I picked this camera up and started taking photos with it right away, just that muscle memory took a little bit of time to get around. But what is nice now is up here by your shutter, you do have a multifunction button that you can push that and you can still access all that information in your electronic viewfinder and get to it. So it's not that this is a bad thing, but it is definitely something that when I first picked up the camera and started picking, it immediately took me off because I was reaching for those white balance or those ISO buttons that I just sort of have figured out by muscle memory, and they just weren't there. So that's shock number one. Number two, this camera shoots 45 megapixel RAW images, which is fantastic, but they are gigantic. And one of the cool things that I thought this camera does that I haven't gotten a chance to experience on any camera before this was it actually has something called CRAW or compact RAW. Now the cool thing about that is the compact RAW lets you take a full 45 megapixel RAW image, but it takes off a huge amount of the file size. So that means you can take these images, shoot them in compact RAW, and your file sizes will be 30 to 40% smaller. And what I like about that is two things. One, coming from a 5D-Mark4, which was shooting 30 megapixels, the file sizes are about the same, so I know my storage is gonna be pretty similar. And the other thing is, all the tests that I've seen on compact RAW, there's really not a discernible difference. Really, the only time you'll see a major difference between compact RAW and regular RAW files is if you're in a situation where you underexpose your images by, say, 4 stops and then pull it back. That's the only time you really see it. Besides that, it's almost indiscernible to go see the difference between a RAW file and a compact RAW file. So, just really efficient, a real good way to kind of maximize your megapixels and also not destroy your hard drive. So that was number two. Your CF cards are now gone. They're toast. They've kind of been rendered obsolete by Canon. Canon now has a dual card slot in here, but now what you have is you have CF Express cards in there that you need to have to unlock some of the full potentials of this camera. Now, if you're like me and have invested lots of money and you have tons of storage now in those CF Express cards, well, you're not going to be able to migrate that over to the new system. That being said, you can still keep them. If you're like me, I'm going to keep my 5D-Mark4 as a great secondary camera to have, so you can still use theirs, but CF cards, no longer part of the game, guys. All right, number 4, in a move that makes absolutely zero sense, but if you're a longtime Canon user, you'll expect this from great Canon cameras, is they have somehow taken a dedicated hybrid camera and removed the video switch that we've all come to know and love all the way back from the Canon 7D series. It used to be if you wanted to go to video from photo mode, you just literally flip the switch with your thumb and you're ready to rock and roll. Now Canon has made it where you actually have to go 2 buttons deep to make it. So now you have to hit the mode button and then hit info to get in there. Not sure what's up with that Canon, but it is a little bit weird, and it definitely does slow you down when you're doing hybrid video to photo. Number 5, and you just have to bring it up because this is really one of the most amazing things, and actually probably the single factor that got me the most excited about switching to this camera, and that is the autofocus. It is superb, guys. It's amazingly precise, very, very good, and locks on. I find myself, only having this for a week, I find myself getting almost 100% of eye autofocus pictures when I shoot it. The other good thing is you can, customize this just like you could before. So I have basically my exposure lock button now where I have it as a fast button. So if I'm shooting something, I can just click that and instantly go to eye autofocus. The autofocus by itself will revolutionize the way you shoot. The lens mounts. Now, if you know anything about the Canon EOS R system, they are no longer EF mounts, they are RF mounts. Now, I'm one of those guys, I've been shooting in Canon for 20 years. I have a lot of Canon glass. I didn't want to have to go out and buy a bunch of new glass. The good news is, the new Canon RF lenses are spectacular, but Canon has done a fantastic job making mounts that, as far as I can tell, completely seamlessly let you take your older EF glass and mount it to the camera. You're not punished for having all of the glass in there. And what I find is that I can put my older EF glasses on here, and I've seen absolutely zero lag or problems with the autofocus on the EF lenses to this. These are actually so cool. There's actually a version that has a drop-in ND filter that I got that I'm probably gonna do a review on in a future episode because that is awesome and it's definitely worth talking about. Okay, so this one's a small thing, but I think you need to be aware of it. And that's that when you cut on the R5, the back screen here is always on. It's essentially, even if you're in photo mode, that back screen is always on, which is very different if you're a 5D Mark IV user who, if you want the back screen on that, you can hit the live view button and get it. But on the R5, it's always on, which I would have to imagine will greatly affect your battery life if you're out there doing photo shoots. So one thing that I would recommend is I actually made a fast button here that I can cut it on and off with like that, just to try and save battery life. So I'll have to do some tests on that in the field, but I would imagine having this back screen all the time could greatly impact your battery life if you're focused on photography. So something I definitely think you should know. All right, shock number 8. And this, besides the autofocus, is my second most incredible thing about that, and that is the EVF. Having come from an SLR world where you don't have an electronic viewfinder, it is a game changer for me, especially when I'm out in the field. I do a lot of work, outdoor work, out in the middle of nowhere, and being able, and I find myself when you're out there looking at the back of your screen trying to figure out what's going on, sometimes with a light, it's hard to figure out. Sometimes you just can't be certain you got that precision in there. The great thing about the EVF, I can lift it up to my eye, I can look through there. This EVF is beautiful. I can know instantly that I got what I need. And for me, the EVF along with the autofocus on this camera are by far the two things that when you pick it up will shock you the most. Just, it makes your camera feel like, if you're an experienced photographer, the tool feels so much more responsive and capable now. And I find that, I know in the field there's going to be no surprises. Because of this EVF, I can know exactly what I got. I can do it fast and roll. All right, now, number 9 is going to be, at least the shock for me was, I went out, I quickly got this camera, I took a bunch of pictures, I brought the files into my computer. This is such a new system that I'm on a Mac, and your computers, you kind of need to get things updated. The computers are actually a little bit behind this. This won't be an issue, I think, in another 2 or 3 months, but it's still an issue now in October of 2020. The Mac cannot read these new RAWs that are on these. It just can't now. Also, when I first tried to bring my files into Photoshop and Lightroom, they couldn't even read it. I had to end up updating all of my Adobe software to be able to read it. So just be prepared for that. It's not just, I've gotten so used to just always having my computer play nicely with my Canon files. This was something that did require a little bit of update. So be prepared for it. The last shock that you will have as a 5D Mark IV owner going to the Canon USR is probably something you're well aware of, and that is some of the video capacities. This camera does do full frame 4K, which is a huge upgrade over the super cropped version of the old 5D Mark IV. The file sizes, it's not motion JPEG anymore, so that's much nicer. And I just find this to be a much, much more useful 4K. I'll be honest, the 5D Mark IV, I thought the 4K with the rolling shutter and the file sizes was just completely impractical. I literally never used it in 4K. Whereas here now I feel a camera that if I'm shooting and need to pick up something quick in 4K, I can do it real quick and rock and roll with it. Okay, so there you go. The biggest shocks moving from the Canon 5D Mark IV to the world of mirrorless and the Canon R5. I hope that was helpful. I will be using this camera a lot more on shoots coming up, so I'll be able to give you a little more information about the things that I think it really does well or things that might surprise me in the next couple weeks. If you want to hear anything else, just leave me a comment down below. And yeah, man, guys, get on out there, enjoy the weather, and shoot away.